Then
What up, what up, what up? Welcome to this week's episode of New Orleans Basketball. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined with my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's popping with you again?
What up, man? Feels like a low-key time loop right now, like we in the TVA. Like we going back in time to refix a old episode, and it'll be released, on Monday. So it feels like we're in the middle of a low-key to some TVA stuff going on for all my Marvel heads out there. Nah, man, everything's all good. Trying to avoid Twitter at all costs, because but other than that, everything's all good, man. How's everything on your side?
Everything is cool. Getting ready to hit this vacation with the family a little bit. Much needed.
Well deserved.
So we'll see. We'll see on that end. But yeah, before we get too much into the topic today, again, we want to talk about the Pelicans wings again. This time around, do it properly. And there's been some movement and some news since then. So before we get too far into this, make sure you guys follow us over here. Again, we've migrated from Pels Pod. We're now New Orleans Basketball. You can find us on Twitter at NO Basketball No E. You can find us on IG, NO Basketball No E. Whatever you want to watch us on, that's what you can follow us on. We appreciate the support there. Another thing came up before we get to the main thing. Chris Paul. There were talks with the Suns that Chris Paul is on his way out. They're trying to find a trade partner. If not, they will waive him. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, he came out. He was on the Pivot podcast talking about his relationship in New Orleans and things like that. But what are your thoughts on Chris Paul being a free agent? And, should the Pels be interested?
Yeah, man, it's crazy. It is really crazy how fast, the NBA, swings, man. Because at one time, Chris Paul was the most toxic contract out there. He can only be traded for like Russell Westbrook, who was also viewed as a toxic contract. And then he got to OKC and revitalized his career and his image, right? He was no longer a toxic contract. People were like, man, this guy is a leader. This is why you bring a guy like him in. Then he gets to Phoenix and goes through everything with Phoenix, and those guys get to the finals. And, like always, it seems to happen with Chris Paul. He gets hurt. And he can't play up to the level of his of what we know him to do, and then also the level of that contract. And that's what happens, man. So it's crazy. The pendulum swings, man. Basketball is such a short time, right? Even though Chris Paul has had this long contract, this long career, you see how short those windows are for opportunities of success and things like that. But as far as New Orleans go, I mean, listen, the Pelicans. Everybody talks about the Pelicans need a floor general, needing a guy to set people up and things like that. And, I don't know what mind frame that Chris Paul is in as far as like what he's looking for, as far as role expectancy, as far as salary expectancy, things like that. The Pelicans are already very close to the tax line. We already been talking about, are there going to be potential moves to get close or further away from the tax line, and God forbid the second tax apron, and and things like that. So also you already have two small guards on the team right now, as far as Jose Alvarado and Kyra. And first of all, let's talk about, man, could you imagine a locker room with Chris Paul and Jose in it together? Nope. That's a tough ask. And so, obviously Chris Paul brings a level of IQ and leadership very similar to CJ McCollum. And obviously, the city of New Orleans has had their feelings towards Chris Paul, whether you love him, whether you hate him, you hate the way he plays, things like that. I think that's more about what people were more upset about is the way he plays as opposed to him leaving. I don't think people were, too upset with him leaving. But I think it was the way he plays, the flopping, the baiting for calls and things like that. So I don't know if that's the move that the Pelicans should make. I think if you're looking to bring in people, you want to bring in guys who fix the shooting, the defensive at the rim, things like that. And then also bring them in and not be sub 6 foot tall. So
Right.
he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, all time great. I just don't think that marriage is one that needs to be had right at this moment, where the Pelicans are and where Chris Paul is in his career.
Right. I agree. I think, it's easy to say that he wants to keep playing and he wants to try to get a ring. And so, again, I don't think that screams go play for the team that just missed the playoffs, And so, like, I don't know if that's necessarily what he's looking for. To your point, like, I think he still values himself like a Hall of Fame talent. And so, in that scenario, what type of role would you be looking at, right? And so, with the Pelicans, I just don't know the fit, because if all things are optimal, right, like he's going to win a championship, in order to get there, you need to have Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson healthy. Well, if those two are healthy, you run into the same problem that you kind of saw. Like, you're not going to keep the ball out of Brandon Ingram and Zion's hands just so that Chris Paul can help facilitate to Jackson Hayes. Like, you're not going to do that. And so the only role that would make sense for him would be like an off the bench type role. And then if one of those guys are not available, maybe he takes a bigger role at that point. But again, you're already talking like CJ McCollum's standpoint. So, like, again, to your point with the locker room that the Pelicans currently have intact, I just don't see blowing that up because Willie Green and Chris Paul are good friends being the reason, right? I just can't see that. But with that being said, again, what we want to talk about, the main part of this team is the wings. They're the core of this team. Like, if you look at the team and say, if they're going to be successful, these guys have to be healthy. These guys have to be playing at a high level, and the rest of the pieces around them just have to fit in. Like, you look at the team, obviously Zion is your best player, your generational talent, your gravity magnet. Then you've got BI, who's an all NBA caliber player, also next to him in a wing position. Herb is your best and elite defender, not just, from a Pelicans standpoint, but in terms of across the league, his ability, his on-ball defense, his blocks, his steals, his impact on the game is elite for such a young player. And then you've got Trey, who also has an elite skill set at wing at 6'9", 6'10", and things like that, who has, again, an elite skill set in this league, his ability to shoot the ball. And you really haven't seen it too much next to Zion, because when Zion was available, Trey wasn't getting minutes like that. Like, he was still coming along and building Willie Green's trust. And so in that scenario, you haven't seen the best part of Trey Murphy yet as well. And then people forget, like, Najee Marshall, the knife, he averaged 15 points per game and 5 rebounds in his 21 games starting this season. So, like, people talk about Najee, and maybe you don't want him in your lineup for 82 games, and you don't want him to start in that position in 82 games. But in a pinch, he showed you that he can produce as well. So you look at the team, and you look from the best player to the heart of the locker room to the leader of the team, and they're all in the wing position. So that brings up the question heading into the offseason. Do the Pelicans need any more wings? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. I mean, when you look up and down the roster, there's a bit of a devoid of the things that you need, right? When you talk about like entry passes from like guards and floor general spacing, whatever all it is that the point guards do, and then also rim protection at the rim with a big man, right? Because most of your talent is in that wing position, like you said, and so. It's a fair question, but for me, I think the answer is yes. I think if you are going to address the shooting issue, right, and obviously it's something that needs to be addressed when you talk about the Pelicans, I think that you want to keep finding guys that are closer to Trey Murphy than Kyra Lewis, right? The NBA is showing you, that it's a tall man's game, right? We talk about football, low man wins. In basketball and the NBA, tall man wins, right? You look at, some of the guys who are run away, some of the best talent, some of the most accomplished talent, LeBron and Giannis and guys like that, and all the way Kevin Durant, and you could go back further and further. That even the likes of Michael Jordan, like, he was a guard, but at that time at 6'6", and the way he was flying around and things, I mean, he was more of a wing than a guard, than a smaller guard and things like that. So you look at just the most athletic people and the most talented people in the league. They're taller, they're athletic, they're linky, they're guys who can contribute in multitude of ways, right? Even if you're not shooting well or you're not finishing well, at 6'7", 6'8", you should be able, to get your hands up and defend and be athletic and things like that. Even the guys like Duncan Robinson, who was out here shooting in the finals, putting points on the board, when he's not shooting, and people talk about his defensive, his lack of defense. He's 6'7", 6'8". He can contribute and at least, contest and be physical and be tall. And so when you're thinking about the shooting with the Pelicans and things that you might need, whether it's the shooting or the rim protection, really, I think the best fit is to be looking for a wing, right? Be looking for that guy who's 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", who can get 6'9", 6'10", those guys who can play both sides of the ball, but who can shoot, who can also shoot. There's a ton of those guys spread out across the NBA, and it's only behooving of the Pelicans to continue to add. If you're going to do it in the draft, obviously go find you a guy that can fit that. If you're not going to address the big, go get a wing or in free agency, right? Get one of these guys that are 6'7", 6'8", that can contribute and become part of the Wingstop family that is the Pelicans.
So I hear you, and the one thing I'm surprised you did say is the injury history, right? Like BI and I have a significant injury history, so the guards we talk about sound great on paper, but rarely are they all available. I heard a Gucci song the other day. They're like, "I'm like Zion before the injury." I'm like, oh my god! Like literally everybody wants a piece in terms of the Pelicans team and things like that. But the other part of it is like it's a wing dominated league. You just talked about it. Like the majority of games finish, regardless if it's the finals going on right now or it's a regular season game, the majority of the games finish with one big on the court, a bunch of wings, and maybe like one guard. Like that's how teams close out games, because and sometimes you got a small ball center who basically is a wing. So like that is what today's NBA is calling for, and so the more you have, the better. Now, the argument that I would make that if you're going to make adjustments this offseason, which you should be looking to make changes, you may not necessarily have to do it at the wing position. I mean, 4 of your 5 best players are wings. Let's just be honest and call it what it is. Like when David Griffin said that like 26 of the 30 NBA teams would switch rosters with them, it's because of their wings. It's because that everyone is looking for a versatile group. They're looking for Herb Jones, who has the ability to grow into an offensive player. They're looking for a Najee off the bench for $2 million that can give you 15 points again. They're looking for a Trey Murphy who figure out that I can shoot better than the majority of the league. So every time I touch the ball, I probably should shoot. Oh, by the way, now I'm adding a dribble package because the new season of 2K came out and I got a little bit of wiggle to my game. So like, everyone is looking for that. And then you kind of got a cheat code in Dyson Daniels, who operates more like a wing in the half court because he's not necessarily your ball penetrator, but in transition, he's more like a guard because he's looking for the outlet pass and things like that. So you could always kind of use Dyson to guard up or defend up or whatever it may be. And so in that situation, to your point, I just think there are 2 glaring needs on this team in terms of rim protection and the ability to shoot the ball. And if the wing position is there and you think that's the best value for you and it's the best player available that you could get your hands on this offseason, then go for it. You never have enough good players, but I just think there's other areas of the rosters that could be addressed before you look at the wing position. So talk about being addressed, talk about changes. The Pelicans decided to overhaul their medical staff. Again, I think people got to take a step back and like really look at the situation. There's probably some things going on within the situation that could have been done better. And, there were some reports that came out that people weren't happy with Aaron Nelson and his team in terms of the check back in 2 weeks type reports. And no, you're not going to play unless you hit this barrier, this barrier, this barrier. But I think some of that has to do with the players as well. What are your thoughts on it? Any feelings toward them overhauling the medical staff? David Griffin said changes were going to come, and sure enough.
Yeah. I think that, rehauling the medical staff is obviously, something that probably has been talked about behind closed doors and something that they've been looking towards since, things have been going on with Zion and Brandon Ingram and even some of the other guys like Jose and things like that, guys who may or may not have been ready to play, but were not able to be cleared by Aaron Nelson and his team. And so when you think about, taking that decision out of his hand and, putting him in a different area, in a different role, I think it obviously, change a different viewpoint, a different set of eyes is something that will revitalize, the team and things like that, right? If another guy comes in and say, listen, if you can play playing free and I'm convinced that it doesn't hurt you further, then I'll clear you to go, right? Or if there is a little bit of pain, I'll clear you to go. We saw Malcolm Brogdon in the conference finals played through a torn ligament in his elbow. Sat out a game at the discretion. They cleared him again to go, and then he said that he needed surgery after. So there are opportunities for people to give a clear and let people play. But to your point, and something you said in passing, I don't think that Aaron Nelson doing the things that he whatever. It's upon the players to contribute to this, right? This is not a one person problem. It isn't Aaron Nelson is the reason players get injured, right? He might be the reason they don't get cleared earlier or faster. But I think it's upon the players to make sure that they're in optimal condition, make sure that they're in the right space, taking care of their bodies, doing everything that they can do to at least help stage off some of these injuries, or be able to of their body parts so that they can withstand an injury and things like that. And so I don't know if this is the elixir to fix all of the problems. I think that you could find yourself 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the season saying, oh, why is this person hurt? Knock on wood that it doesn't happen. But, oh, what's going on with this person? And, and it won't be Aaron Nelson's fault. It'll be somebody else you got to blame. But I think it's upon the players to take care of themselves, get themselves in the best possible shape and opportunity, have to be competitive, play through injury, get injured at all. So it's a system. It's upon the medical staff, but it's also upon the players to take care of themselves. And I think that if one side is not holding up their end, then the other side can't possibly, be optimized or be up to their potential if the other side isn't part as well.
Yeah, I think of what CJ McCollum said in, one of the podcasts he was on a couple of weeks ago, and said, it's not just BI, it's not just Zion in terms of being available. Like, look it up and down the roster. Everybody was hurt. Like, literally the whole roster was banged up in some capacity. And what he alluded, he's like, listen, there's a way that you have to maintain your body that's outside of just running and lifting and keeping on track. Like, you've got to eat the right way, get your sleep and things like that. And they've got to be better as a collective. Remember, they're a young group in terms of their habits and being professionals and things like that. And I think that was an emphasis that I don't know if a lot of people clung to, but I think it's not just the stars. I think everyone's kind of have to reevaluate how they do things, because you got to be available at the end. It's great to have all the talent, but you don't want to be that team that everyone looks back on and says, what if, right? And so there's a lot of things that are coming up. Again, David Griffin promised change, and so there's been some change. But let's just say that he looks at this crop of wings and is like, you know what? We just gonna run it back, because we don't know if there's gonna be any changes. Again, we hope that our stars stay more healthy, and we hope Trey takes another jump and things like that. We're just gonna run it back. I can honestly see them doing that at this position. What are some of the things you're looking at that will need to change if they decide to run back Zion, BI, Trey, Herb, Najee?
Well, I'm not going to give you the cop-out answer and say health, because obviously. But I do think one of the things that, Brandon, that Willie Green can use with Brandon Ingram, Zion, Trey, Herb, all of the wings. First thing is there needs to be more action with your two best players involved, right? There needs to be more dribble handoffs between BI and Zion. There needs to be more inverted pick and rolls, meaning BI setting the screen on Zion's man between those two. Because when your two best players are in the action, right? We see that with Jamal Murray and Jokic and Jimmy and Bam and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown don't really do it a lot. And you see what tends to happen to those guys, right? So I think having those two guys, having your two best players in the action causes the defense to think, right? Have to, which one do we go guard? How do we handle, both of these guys, right? And they're so different in a ways of who has to guard both of those players that I think that you can hunt severe mismatches, right? You probably have a taller, faster guy on Brandon Ingram, but he's probably a lot skinnier than Zion, right? As in the exact opposite. Zion probably has a bigger guy in front of him because you have to stop him from getting to the rim. Well, that guy can't keep up with Brandon Ingram, and he can get to his spots, and Zion can pin down as a roller. So get those two guys in actions a lot, because those two guys are so gifted at the things that they do. They're at the top of the top in the things that they do, right? Brandon Ingram is an elite mid-range scorer, a guy that is top of the top when you talk about wings in that area. And we know what Zion brings down in the paint around the basket, how unstoppable he is. And so I think having both of those guys in more actions will do better, best for both. And then obviously you want to have Trey Murphy on the floor with Zion as much as possible. Those two should be married at the hip, because Trey Murphy is not going to see the open shots, the same type of open shots he'll see without Zion that he'll see with Zion. Those will be different types of open shots. And I think if you want to be successful, Trey Murphy has to become the third option on offense. And it's not a slight to CJ, because some days CJ will be the third option on offense just because he'll have it rolling, because he's such a great scorer and a great shooter and things like that. But I think Trey Murphy, as efficient as he is, and how much of a mismatch that he is, he needs to be the third option on offense as far as, the pecking order of shots. And so getting him more shots, getting him more involved with Zion, have him do some dribble handoffs similar to what Zion and JJ Redick went through. Trey Murphy can do some of those too, except he has the ability to not only hit the three, but take it one dribble and put you on a post and some kid's wall. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different things that you could do with him. And as far as a guy like Herb, I think if you can just deploy Herb more as a cutter, as an off-ball screener, you saw a lot of plays where Herb kind of set screens, just like using his basketball IQ, getting Trey in the corner for wide open threes, setting back screens. I think you could do some of those for Brandon Ingram. You could do some of those for Zion as far as like back cuts and baseline cuts. Use Herb's basketball IQ to put him in positions where he can affect the game in more ways than just corner threes and even initiating offense. He can do a multitude of things. He's a pretty good screen setter as far as keeping his base and getting a clean screen off. So I think you can use him more often than not. So I for sure putting Brandon Ingram and Zion in actions together, having Trey Murphy and Zion married at the hip as far as playing time goes and things like that. And then use Herb to his most, his best abilities, which is his IQ, obviously his defense, but his playmaking and his IQ is one of those things that shines bright when he gets it rolling. And I think that you could use him more in options to free up more guys on the offensive end.
I'll take the same approach that I did with the wings and with the bigs. You got to have three plans. You got to have plan A, because again, like, you can't just keep going into the season thinking everything's going to be great and this is the year where everyone's going to be healthy. You got to have a backup plan, because the team is built very well for everyone to be healthy. But as soon as you take the main ingredients out, all of a sudden your gumbo is trash. Like that is what the Pelicans have been running into at different parts of the last couple seasons. So you have to approach it like, hey, what are we going to do if X is out, if B is out, if Z is out, right? Like, what are your plans in that scenario? So plan A, stars are healthy. You miraculously get 65 games for BI and Zion. I still think you need more shooting. Like, Trey can't be the only option. Now, again, like, if Zion has the ball more, you're going to get more wide open shots from BI. You're going to get more wide open shots from CJ. That's going to happen. But outside of that, if Zion's not on the court and things like that, he cannot be the only one. The NBA average for three-point attempts per game were 34. I think the Pels are at 30, which is the bottom 5 of the league. I think they could easily get to 34. Like, the number of attempts from your best players, but also adding more shooting to the roster will probably help that as well. Again, people say like, okay, you should build a team around Bi. You should build a team around Zion. Like if you really look at it, you kind of need the same thing for both. Like you need more shooting and more spacing. And so all together, I just think the Pels have to be better in that area, whether that comes from their existing wings and Zion shoot more threes and Bi shoot more threes, or if that comes from bringing someone aboard that can help you in that area. The most recent plan B, 1 star is available for part of the season. I agree with you. Everything you said about Trey, you cannot leave last season and walk into this season and be like, oh yeah, Trey, you take your spot back on the bench. There's no way. You just can't do it. He was third behind Steph and Clay in the most 3-pointers made the last month of the season. Like you can't put that guy on the bench. He's only going to get better off the dribble. You saw a little bit of glimpses of it throughout the year. The man was in a slam dunk contest. So again, he's going to be able to finish as he builds into his frame, as he adds a little bit more dribble package, as Zion and Brandon Ingram got people hugged on them because they can't leave. Like he's only going to have more opportunities. And so I 100% agree with you, both on ball and off ball. Like Willie Green's got to incorporate him into more plays. You see it in the finals right now. Like Eric Spoelstra in the clutch is not necessarily running the play for Jimmy Butler. Like sometimes it's for Max Strus randomly in the fourth quarter. Like some of that has to be incorporated besides the one play that we watch for Trey throughout the season. He's got to be a bigger part of the offense. But the biggest part, in my opinion, is Herb. He's got to continue to pick up where he's left off. After the All-Star break, he averaged 10 points per game and was shooting 44% from three on 2 attempts per game. I'm not even sure if he has to shoot a whole lot more attempts, but he just has to keep the same mentality. You said it perfectly. Herb, you're not a 3-point shooter. You can shoot 3-pointers and you're working on that and don't stop working on it, but you have so much more to offer the game. Like his ability just to create an extra possession, get those rebounds right next to the goal he has no business getting, and going back up and going to the free throw line and things like that. That's how Herb has to play because, again, you're watching the finals. You're watching what it takes to get to the mountaintop. Everybody on the court has to be a threat. And if you're not a threat, you'll get exposed on one end. And if you're not a threat, you'll get taken off the court. Like is what's happening at high level basketball. And so Herb has to continue to be a threat. And I think playing with a little bit more pace, we've talked about this, will help everyone in that circumstance. So again, like having a plan for what happens if this and what happens is that, you got to walk into the season and have multiple efforts towards it. So we talk about shooting more threes. And again, it's important because of the spacing on the floor and what comes with that. But I also want to take the other side of it as well. Like, if the Pelicans, again, what does Bi do best? He puts pressure on the rim and he can pull up for the midi at any point. Obviously, everybody knows what Zion is HB dive right to the goal. That's his favorite play, things like that. These two were top 2 scorers in the NBA. Excuse me, 22 scored in the NBA. Bi finished 22 in scoring. He shot 3.6 3-pointers per game. There were no other players in the top 22 in scoring that shot less than that. You know the other 3? Giannis, Joel Embiid, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 2 of those are centers, 7-foot centers, and one of those is incredible at what he does. Shout out to him, first team All-NBA. There has to be an easier way to score. Like, there has to be. Bi was working so hard, and to his credit, he did everything he could to keep the Pelicans in the playoff race. But life has to be a little bit easier, right? Like, do you think if Bi and Zion just add like an extra, we just talked about it, they can get to an extra 4 or 5 attempts per game, they're right there at league average. They're never going to be at the top. That's not what their best players do best. But do you think if they just take a couple more jump shots, it could preserve their bodies a little bit and help them make it through 65 games of a season?
Yeah, I mean, the NBA season is long and it's grueling. And, you know, in those January games against the Washington Wizards on a Wednesday, like, you don't need to be going, you know, head up collisions with Daniel Gafford, you know, over and over and over, over and over again. I think, you know, watching the NBA right now, watching the finals, Like Jimmy Butler right now is you can see him problem solving and starting to get, same with Bam, starting to realize that they need to pull up at the half court. I mean, right at the free throw line extended, right below the free throw line, for the pull up, for the mid range, for the teardrop, for the floater, things like that. So, because they know they can't keep going in there over and over again, and Aaron Gordon going at him, and obviously Jokic just standing there and banging with his body over and over again. Like, you can't keep doing that, right? There are times when that works, late in games and things like that. But you have to diversify your offensive portfolio, because if you don't, you keep running into the same, physical, especially like Zion running into the same physical, injuries over and over again, because you're taking off 2 feet and falling every single time. Or Brandon Ingram, right? Brandon Ingram's injury came from kicking the back of Dylan Brooks' heel. But you could see even when he came back, there were times where he's, shooting over 2 and 3 people in the mid range, and having to come down, and we're all holding our breath that he doesn't land on somebody's foot and things like that. And if some of those are just, 1 or 2 of those are catch and shoots, or in Zion's case, if you just come down and stop on a dime. I know it's difficult for such a large, heavy man to stop on a dime, but if you could get a floater or get anything like that, those work. But I think what really could benefit those 2 guys, and like you said, playing a little bit off the ball and catching 1 or 2 threes a game, right? Because now, if you're just a threat of taking a shot, right? If you're not just every single time I know exactly where this person is going, every single time, 1 or 2 threes will a game will do it for you, right? 1 or 2 threes from Zion will do it for you, where the defense is like, man, he'll take that shot. I need to take 1 step up, and 1 step up, whether he takes that 3 or 1 step up where he gets the guy on his hip, where he's not, going through the center over and over and over again. I think those things will work for you. So definitely you want to add, more threes to the game for those guys. And we're not talking 7 and 8 like Trey. Trey needs to shoot like 9, 10 a game. If BI can get to 5 or 4 in a game, and Zion can get to 2 in a game, I think not only will it help preserve their bodies, but it'll take the Pelicans offense to the next new level, because Brandon Ingram is good enough, if he takes 5 threes a game, to make 3 of them. He's good enough to do that. Zion, we've seen Zion shoot threes, and it's like, it's not ugly, and sometimes, majority of the time, he goes in. He just doesn't shoot them enough. So they are talented enough to add this to their arsenal. Zion's jump shot is not ugly. Brandon Ingram can shoot threes. They just have to commit to doing it and not be afraid of what might come afterwards if you miss it or things like that. We watched Giannis airball threes in playoff situations, and he did not care. Came back and continued to shoot it. And now he's at a point where if you leave him completely wide open, he'll hit that 3, and defenses know that now, right? So they're not completely selling out on the 3, but he's being able to draw somebody out, one or 2 steps out, to where you're thinking about it. And I think that Zion and Brandon Ingram can get to that as well. Trey Murphy, he just needs to add more threes. He needs to take more. He's not taking enough. 7, 8 is not enough. 9 to 10 should be a goal for you, right? Fall back, playing 7, 8, but 10 should be the goal. And I think that adding more threes, across the board between Zion, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, Herb doesn't particularly need to shoot more threes because he affects the game in other ways. But I think between those 3 in particular, not only would it benefit the top 2 guys, meaning with their health and increasing the offense, but I think Trey Murphy can take even another leap as far as his accolades and scoring and the tangible things you see as in the stat box and things like that. And it'll take the Pelicans offense to another level.
Right. I agree with you there. So we want to take a look at the prospects. The first thing I'll say when you watch the prospects at the wings position this year is there is no Trey Murphy in this draft. Like, I went back and looked, and I watched a lot of film and watched a lot of guys. There's nobody shooting 50, 40, 90. There's nobody. And if they're close, they're really bad on defense. Like, there's not somebody who's like, oh, I can see the growth on defense, and he got a chopper. Like, it's either or right now. And again, when you're looking at this part of the draft, this is generally what you get: flawed players that have to show that they can improve in a different area. And so I look at this, and again, there are multiple ways. Again, there's two areas the Pelicans need to address. How they address them and at what position is to be determined. But all in all, I want to take a look at some of these players because I do think in the right scenario, some of these players can make an impact. So who I want to start with first is, shout out, Duke player. Again, there's a good chance the Pelicans look at them if they went to Duke. Is Garrick Whitehead. Again, highly touted prospect coming out. Came out with injuries, slowed down his start to the season. He's extremely young. He's 18 years old, 6'6", but he's a shooter. He only averaged 8 points per game, but he shot 42% from the 3-point line. So again, you gotta address rim protection or you gotta address shooting. This guy would be shooting. He reminds me a lot of another player from Duke that came out injured, AJ Griffin from last year, who went to the Hawks. Again, a guy who had injuries, slowed down his athleticism, but found ways to be impactful. He had some really good games. He won a couple games for the Hawks this season. But again, this team has injury history when it comes to their wings. I don't know if the Pelicans are going to want to invest in another injury history player. But that being said, he's got a really good offensive game. He is fluid for the 3-point line. Like, he hunts his 3-point shot. That would be great next to anyone on this team and things like that. But what do you think? What are your thoughts about Garrick Whitehead? Would that be a player that, who knows, maybe the pick's not 14. Maybe you trade back and a part of a bigger deal. But would that be a player that would interest you at that position?
No. Unfortunately, he would not be. I think that he has some upside. Obviously, the shooting aspect is something that, again, we always say that the rim doesn't move, the court doesn't move. So if you can shoot that well in college, you have a good chance at least to be a good shooter in the pros. And so he definitely can do that, right? He's a big physical guy, kind of stocky, but still growing into his body. Very similar, like you said, to AJ Griffin. I just think that there's not a lot of the injury history is the first thing, right? Yeah. You don't want, this pick that you have right now. You're not looking for the next superstar, right? Especially with the team that you have. You're not looking for the next superstar. You're looking for, if he is the next superstar, then great. But this pick, you don't think it's going to be the next superstar. And so you want to find a guy that's going to be able to contribute and fit in with the pieces that you have. And with a guy who's injury prone, who didn't take a lot of shots at Duke, Duke underperformed this season. And we talked about Dereck Lively in the big man episode, and how there were things about the Duke team that didn't really sit well with people. And so how does that reflect upon the players? But I think that Garrick Whitehead, I think he has a chance to be a really solid pro. But, I just don't know if him having the injury history and being so young, I think, if when you got a guy that's with that kind of injury history and they're also young. So not only are you worried about the learning curve, but you're worried about how much can you put on this guy before, something starts to go a little wonky with the injury history. And now he's a shooter. He can shoot well. He has a mid-range game. He can pass well. There are things about him that are really well, but I think that there are better fits for the Pelicans that'll be available, that is sure to be available if they stay at 14. Obviously, like you said, they may trade back. But I don't know if Garrick Whitehead is the kind of guy that the Pelicans are going to be looking for as far as investing in number 14 pick in.
All right, so let's talk about one that I think they might be. So Chris Murray out of Iowa. Keegan Murray's twin brother. So if you want to know what he looks like, go look at the Sacramento Kings roster. When I watch his game, 6'11" forward, he's a little bit older, 22 years old, averaged 8 rebounds, shot 34% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. So he was letting it fly at 20 points per game. Like, he was the main source of their offense after his brother obviously got drafted and had a great rookie season as well. I look at this player and I'm like, this sounds like a player that the Pelicans would like. He's a really good on-ball defender. He's very physical at the point of attack. He's a really good wing defender. I don't think he'll be a small ball five like an EJ has potential to have. He's more of a lock you down one-on-one more so than a help side defender or anything like that. But he's a good finisher around the rim. Again, 34% for three, not a great clip, but he improved as the season went on. And because of how he was used, like you always have to look at percentages and things like that, and then say, well, what were they doing in their role? Like he was the main scorer. So just like we talk about Brandon Ingram having to shoot more catch and shoot threes because Zion would be on the floor. Well, if this guy is on the floor with other guys that draw attention, something tells me his 3-point percentage would continue to grow. And oh, by the way, his twin brother excels in this area. So something tells me that's all they work on in the offseason. So I think that this would be an area that he grows, and I think he'd be a good fit for the Pelicans. Now, there's a ceiling to Chris Murray. Like he's not a creator. He's not a good dribbler. He's not breaking you down off the dribbler. Like he's limited in that facet that he doesn't have a whole lot of moves or anything like that. You're looking for this guy for the defense and the offensive upside for this particular player. But what are your thoughts on Chris Murray? How do you think he would fit with the Pelicans roster?
Yeah, I really like Chris Murray. I like what I've seen in his game, and 7 attempts a game at the forward position at 6'11". That lets me know that he has confidence in his shot. He's not afraid to let it loose, and so I think that bodes well for him. One thing that I think is going to be really good for Chris Murray, and that what I think he'd be a good fit for the Pelicans, is that you kind of know the kind of professional, the kind of pro that he's going to be, right? You hear a lot of people talk about his brother in the profession that he the professionalism that he brought to the Kings roster and into that locker room. And I think that his brother is kind of in that same ilk, just a really good professional player, a guy who's going to show up and is very coachable and things like that. All the things that Mike Brown says about Keegan, I think you could probably say the same things about Chris. But as far as being on the floor, I mean, there's a lot of things that he does well. He's a great, like you said, a great on-ball defender. He's a phenomenal help side defender. He'll come over and with hands up. And at 6'11", Garrick Whitehead was 6'6". This is a guy that's 6'11", but has the frame of a 3-4 more than a 4-5. So when you think about 6'11" and being a 3-4, having those 3-4 skills, those forward skills, I think that's a very intriguing blend of talent as far as in skill. I mean, and size wise. So I think there's a lot to like about him there. For somebody who shot 34%, from the 3-point line, I think that there is a lot of games you can go look back and see where he was unconscious from the 3-point line. Like he'll hit 4, 5, and 6 in a row. Like those are on film that he has done that. Now there are games where they lock in on that, and it's being the main hub of his team of Iowa. I think you saw him get the best defenders every night, and also get the game plan to defend was for Chris Murray. So he saw a lot of the best defenders and game plans gifted and towards him. And so I think for him to still be able to get 7 threes off, either he was getting them, he wasn't getting them off the step back. We saw that he's not really a creator or anything. So a lot of those were catch and shoot threes. And I think that is what he's going to be for a team like the Pelicans, where, he's camped in the corner and being a floor space. I think of a lot of like Grant Williams and PJ Tucker just in a 6'11" frame, right? A guy who's, you're probably not trying to defend him, but like you can't leave him open either because he can hit those open threes. But again, he's 6'11". He's athletic in the sense that he knows how to be 6'11" and contesting shots and being at the rim and things like that. And so I think that there's a lot to like about Chris Murray, and the offensive creation things that we see that he doesn't have, or that's not his strongest point. I don't think, as far as the Pelicans go, he'll ever need to do any of that because of the guys like Trey. And even if you go back down and you talk about CJ and guys like that who can create their own shots, and what Zion, obviously with Zion and Brandon Ingram would be giving you. So he'll have a lot of catch and shoot opportunities. And I think, a guy who gets it up at 7 times a game as the number one option, and then also shoot 34%. I think if you bump him down to as your fifth or sixth or seventh option offensively, there's really good value for his growth opportunity there.
I agree. I think he's a player to keep an eye on for sure. So the last prospect we want to talk about solves one of the main issues. Jet Howard, Juwan Howard's son out of Michigan, 6'8" wing, 19 years old. His player comp is Desmond Bain. Now Desmond Bain is not 6'8", but the way that they play is comparable. So he averaged 14 points per game, shot 37 from three on 7 attempts. Pretty impressive from that standpoint. Like, he's a catch and shoot player. Like, he is one of those guys. He is the Duncan Robinson. He is that type of guy that is constantly moving and constantly looking to get his 3-point shot off. He'll make contested threes, close out threes, got the dead eye badge. Like, he has all those things. And he has a little bit of upside in terms of he's got a little bit of wiggle. He's got a decent handle for being 6'8", and so it's not just 3-point-0. Now, again, he's not creating for anybody. Like, he's a scorer. Like, that is what he's here to do. What do you think about a player like Jet Howard?
Yeah, I think of the three that we talked to today. I think Jet Howard is the guy that I would like to see if the Pelicans do get a guy, a wing and stay at 14, and he's there. We've talked about who we really want the Pelicans to draft, meaning Derek Lively or Jordan Hawkins from Connecticut. But I think third on my list is Jet Howard. I think for this guy is phenomenal at shooting. I mean, closeouts, late contests, tight contests. He doesn't care. He does not see you there. And at 6'8", I mean, he could get that shot off against a lot of people. And so I see a lot of fits for him. Again, he lacks the defensive side of the ball. But I think at 6'8", with some time being on the floor, Duncan Robinson, again, we always go back to him because he's the prototypical shooter in today's NBA, a 6'8" guy. Well, I would say Trey Murphy is, but other than that, Duncan Robinson is a phenomenal 3-point shooter, and he's 6'8". And although he gets attacked defensively for his foot speed, he's 6'8", and he tries, right? He tries, and at 6'8", sometimes all you need to do is try, and you can contest the shot and things. And I think Jet Howard has a lot of that too. You mentioned his wiggle and things like that. He's not Chris Paul, but he's also not like terrible at finding other people at getting the ball to other people. And I think in a pinch, if you needed him to make a solid play, I don't think he's like focused all up on the rim. This is going up. I'm not even looking around. He does have some wiggle, and he does have decent playmaking upside that I think will work. But what you're drafting him for is to shoot the ball. And I implore anyone to go watch some of these shots that he made at Michigan, where people are draped all over him. He's coming off of screens. He's coming off of down curls. He's coming off of down pins. He's coming off of corner, some of those corner pick shots where he's just catching. He's catching one-hand sidestep dribbles, and getting them off, and it's barely touching net. So I think at 6'8", with the ability to knock down shots in that fashion, I think that's something that you look for in a guy. And lastly, when we talk about I talked about Chris Murray and the kind of pedigree that he comes from. This is Juwan Howard's son. I mean, this is a guy who was a constant professional as far as his time with the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat had him on his coaching staff for a while, so this is a guy who's been teaching his son the game of basketball in the most professional way. And I think when you got that kind of pedigree and you were coached by Juwan Howard, who through everything, he coaches effort, he coaches defensive intensity and things like that, because that's the kind of player that he was. I think if you got that kind of pedigree and that kind of coaching coming up, your basketball IQ has to be, very well in order to play at Michigan and play for Juwan Howard. And just that basketball IQ, that defensive opportunity to get better, and his incredible shot making. I implore people to just go watch some of his games, go watch some of his highlights, and some of these shots that he makes contested with 3 and 4 people closing out at him because they know he's a 5-alarm fire, and it's just dropping super easily in the rim. Just imagine some of those with Trey Murphy on one side and Zion down in the middle and Brandon Ingram at the top of the key at the range level. And just imagine how so many people watch all of those guys. Yeah, here is this guy who can hit contested three-pointers at a 37, 38, 39% clip, wide freaking open in that corner. So I think that Jett Howard, of these three guys that we're talking about, he's my favorite prospect, that we're mentioning today.
What we talked about is this Pelicans team and their tendency to draft, right? Like tendency, they look at the ability to defend. That's the one thing that makes me think I think the Pelicans might be like, because he's not a good defender at all. Like that is clearly his weak spot.
Mm-hmm.
But again, David Griffin also mentioned that changes need to be happening and there need to be some give and get in terms of the players that they have and what they're willing to do. The thing that you mentioned, first of all, the Pelicans shouldn't be shunning at anybody who shoots 37% from the three-point line at any level or degree of what they play from. First of all, that's first and foremost. But secondly, because of where you're drafting this player, in a perfect world, this player's not playing a whole lot. Doesn't matter who it is, right? Unless you get a Derek Lively and you want to start a Derek Lively. This person is probably playing 10 to 15 minutes a game at max. Look at Dyson. He couldn't even do that last season. So if Willie Green's thing, just like with Trey Murphy, Trey was kind of forced to start because he was the only person on the team to shoot. But I think if it was to Willie Green's part, he would have waited until he felt comfortable with Trey defending on the court. Well, if things go as planned of any sorts, and you have a good chunk of your season with your two best player, this guy can be working with the team and forced to learn how to defend on this roster. I'm sure this roster in this locker room will give him hell at practice until he learns how to defend. Trey Murphy dropped like 30 and 10 at a summer league game last season, and Brandon Ingram's in the interview talking about he ain't got no defense. Like, people are calling it out on this team, and they were sixth in the league in defense. So if they're gonna get somebody where they need to be because they've got a certain skill set, I think that drafting somebody with a little bit of upside offensively and with the ability to grow defensively should be something to at least look at. Again, I don't know if the Pelicans will. History says otherwise, but we shall see. So we talk about BI and we talk about Zion. Now, Zion has been in the news a lot lately. So CJ McCollum's comments on Zion and how he needs to prepare and how that needs to change. And Ryan Russillo flat out asking, like, hey, does he listen to you and things like that? And then Charles Barkley not too long ago talking about how Zion needs to adapt a different mentality in terms of how he's eating, how is he preparing, things like that. And then most recently, the comments about, his personal life. He's going to be a father, and now there's a bunch of other stuff on Twitter talking about different relationships that may or may not happen, things like that. Here's my question to you. Are you feeling some type of way toward like how Zion's approaching the offseason, or are you glad it's the offseason and that at some point the team can get back to basketball? What are your thoughts on the situation? Like, this is a big year for this team, a huge year for this team, I would say. They got to put something on the board in the playoff column. So your star being in the media right now is probably not a great look, especially when he didn't play most of the last 2 years. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's less than ideal, man. It's less than ideal. But I think how I approach it is that, if these are, this situation is happening, Zion is not accused of a crime or anything like that. So it's nothing like that. It's drama, and it's something that it's life, right? It's life. It's ugly. It's the ugly side of life. And I think that, as long as he's a guy, because I mean, listen, for all the things, stuff, the hoopla that's been going on, Zion looked good in some of those pictures that that they were posted, that was posted during his baby shot, his baby reveal and things like that. He looked good, and so if cooler heads can prevail, listen, there's a long time before we're still watching the finals. There's a long time to go between now and when training camp starts and the regular season starts and things like that. So, get these, get the get the things in order that needs to be in order, and get the focus back on basketball, right? Keep the main thing, like Willie Green and like Brandon Ingram and those guys always say. And I think this is an opportunity for him to learn, to mature, right, to grow. Sometimes we have to be forged through fire in order to learn how to be better people and more mature adults and things like that. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to go through a situation like this, but sometimes things need to be knocked across our head before we realize the situation that we in, the opportunity that we have, and things like that. And so I'm hoping that Z continues to keep the main thing the main thing. He has a child on the way, so obviously you want to make sure that you're giving your attention and your love and the things that are important, and keeping those things important. But basketball is the reason why you can live the way you live and do the things that you do. And so from all accounts and the way that he looks, Zion has been in the city, and I would assume he has worked out and has gone to places and got his workouts in, and got some basketball in his life. And I think that that's going to be a refuge for him. The way he said that basketball was a refuge through his injuries, and it was taken away from him. Well, now this is an opportunity. You have a lot of chips on your shoulder, whether it be the contract, whether it be the incentives in the contract, whether it's the media, whether it's this situation, whether it's the injuries that happened that took you away from the game, and so many times. You have a lot of reasons to fall in love with the game of basketball and to immerse yourself into the game of basketball. And I think that Zion's going to find a way to get to that point, to get these affairs in order and to move on, and be the guy that that the entire NBA is waiting to see. Got glimpses of, but is waiting to see when the lights are the brightest.
I look at it this way. So I talk to some people in some NBA. I'm not saying I have no sources or anything like that, but like I tend to not really care about players' personal lives. Like, yeah, like Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that, they'll always find something. I mean, these people have a spotlight on them at all times. Like, there will always be something. But to your point, as long as Commissioner is not walking onto the court or walking onto the TV screen and talking about, we can't wait to give this unprecedented suspension of some kind to my. As long as that's not happening, hey man, you do you. You handle what you got to handle. To your point, don't let it get in the way of your success and this team, because I'm glad you brought it up. The thing that I noticed through all this Zion hoopla this week is like, man, Zion looked like he lost some weight. That's the first thing I sent the Twitter message to you. I text you. I said, man, he looked like he lost some weight. And so to me, someone we were talking about earlier in terms of CJ talking about accountability, Charles Barkley talking about accountability. You saw it toward the end of last season. Zion's always been this like quiet, charismatic guy that, always is smiling about something. But you saw him on the bench, even though he wasn't playing, you saw him yelling at it, not yelling, but talking to his teammates like, hey, trying to motivate and things like that. And so to me, to hell with the personal stuff. Again, congratulations on being a father. That will man you up more than anything else in the world can do. If he's in that mindset and he's trying to get his body right and he's in the city with his teammates and getting to know their tendency, to your point, developing some type of relationship with Brandon Ingram, both on the court and off the court, because I think it's important that those two have some type of relationship. If he's doing those things, hey, I'll see you, when training camp starts. Like, again, you do what you got to do, because I guarantee if you ask around, there are some other NBA players around that will probably be like, man, I'm glad it was him and not me. Like, and so, again, I think it's one of those things where you focus on what's important. If it was going to happen, thank God it happened right now when the Pelicans are not in the middle of the season and something has gone wrong or they lost 10 games in a row, because then the narrative of, well, Zion needs to get traded from New Orleans would start all over again. So to put a ball on everything, the core of this team is here, and now it's time for their leaders to do what's necessary to get their team. You see BI playing in FIBA and working on his game with different people. Like, I keep seeing BI work out with like random people, like Orlando Magic. Like, I'm like, okay, I didn't see BI hanging out with him on his all time, but maybe, right? And so, like, you see him doing what's necessary. You see Zion get himself in shape. You see Dyson, Jose, all those guys are working out right now, even though they got months before it's time to go to start training again. those are the times you want to see it, and that's where my focus is for this team, because that's what's most important there. So again, the draft is not that long away. We got just under 2 weeks left. With that being said, the Pelicans have some decisions to make, whether it's adjustments to what they already have, additions, or subtraction, and things like that. With that being said, what you got left for the people, Garrick?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile a day. Yeah, the wings are the lifeline, and for a shout out to Pusha T, but you can't fly without your wings. So these guys, the leaders of the team, which are through the wing position, have to step up. They have to do things that get the team where it needs to be. They have to sacrifice. They have to commit. And all of these things, and Brandon Ingram committing to FIBA, I think is going to help his game a lot. But I think what it's going to do is going to help the intangibles. A lot of people come back from those FIBA tournaments, those Olympic tournaments, those international games, with a new perspective on life, with a new perspective on leadership, with a new perspective on commitment. So I'm hoping that some of that can rub off onto Brandon Ingram. As always, follow me at Garrick_Rattler on Twitter. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler on Twitter. Follow the page at NO Basketball with no E. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter and on YouTube. Please subscribe to the page on YouTube so we can get this content to you guys. And as always, subscribe to NewOrleans.network, and we'll see you guys next week. Have fun on your vacation, bro. Hey,